I got a question from a follower who's asking, do you think Klæbo is the GOAT after the world champs? In this video, I will try to answer that question in more depth, and I will try to be objective. No matter what I say, there will always be someone who disagrees, and that's fine. At the end of this video, I will make a conclusion, so please watch the full video. Almost 2 years ago, I made a video called Top Greatest Cross-Country Skiers Ever. Looking back on it, I realized that several things went wrong. At that time, I simply did not have the knowledge of skiing history that I have today. Including some of those guys in the top 20 was ridiculous. I would replace several skiers from the modern era with athletes from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. At the number 1 spot, I put Petter Northug Jr., and I called him the greatest male cross-country skier of all time. I can reveal right away, I have changed my mind. Petter Northug is my favorite skier of all time, and I'm not the only one who idolizes him. The fact that he is so popular makes many editors guilty of what is called glazing. The result of this is that people who didn't get to witness Northug's era may have an inaccurate perception of what the reality was like. Who was Northug's main rival for most of his career? Perhaps the fellow countryman Martin Johnsrud Sundby. To get an objective view of how they match up, I did a full comparison of all mass starts and individual start races that both athletes participated in during the last 8 years of Northug's career. If one guy finished 5th in a race and the other guy was number 8, it counts as a win for the man with the better result. I found a total of 69 races, and you know what the record was? Sundby beat Northug 51 times, and Northug beat Sundby 18 times, which is a shocking 74 to 26% ratio. Races from the World Championships and the Olympic Games are also included in this count. When you look at these numbers, was Northug really as dominant as you thought? Of course, other criteria also need to be taken into account, but still, a 74 to 26% record is so significant that it cannot be swept aside. And you'll probably say, but those types of statistics are completely meaningless because the only thing that matters is medals. That brings us to the next topic, which is why you can't judge solely based on medals. Anyone who knows the slightest bit about statistics will understand. In a sport like cross-country skiing, where external factors such as skis and conditions have a massive impact, judging solely based on 1 or 2 races is ridiculous from a statistical perspective. You also have day-to-day variations in sleep quality, stress, and many other controllable and uncontrollable factors affecting performance. To get a clearer picture of athletes' capabilities, you need to analyze a bunch of races to zero out the effects of luck, chance, and general randomness affecting results.
Tenk for eksempel hvis du tar 5 utøvere som akkurat like godt trent, som skal prestere i ett skirenn. Da det faktisk den som kanskje har mest flaks med føre, eller mest flaks med skia, akkurat den dagen, som de få sekunder foran.
This guy has a valid point. I am not saying that athletes who've won gold medals have been lucky, but I'm saying that there are so many variables determining a cross-country skiing race that the fewer races you include in the assessment, the more significance those factors will have. Furthermore, Hans Christer Holund has been on record saying that this idea that the level is somehow magically much higher during championships is simply not the case. Let's just listen to what he says.
Jeg skulle nesten tro at det var vanskeligere å vinne mesterskap, for der enda flere I form, da.
Jeg har tenkt litt på det, og starter jo litt å tvile på om folk faktisk blir I bedre form. Min erfaring at jeg tror ikke nivået noe høyere I et VM enn I World Cup, altså. Og det nok flere som I god form på Beitostølen enn ute I februar når VM kommer.
Det like vanskelig å vinne på Beitostølen, nasjonal åpning eller Roka.
Jeg føler jeg går med livet som innsats I Ruka hvert år, og ikke I nærheten av pallen.
Some athletes will manage to squeeze out a little extra through optimal peaking strategies and mental skills, but the average performance on the highest level is roughly the same throughout the season, regardless of how big the event is. The same guys are on the starting line in December as in March, and the best performance in history could be a random World Cup race for all we know.
Og han bare helt vild. Jeg mener det råeste klassisk løpet over 1,5 kilometer som noen gang prestert. Så.
To put it this way, Hellner has 2 individual gold medals. Sundby only has 1. Would you put Hellner ahead of Sundby in the all-time overall ranks? Oh yeah, Hellner was twice as good. Bolshunov has 2 individual gold medals. Would you seriously say Bolshunov and Hellner are closely matched? That's ridiculous, right? Of course, medals are prestigious and they definitely matter, but it can't be the only criterion determining the caliber of an athlete. 3 guys are normally in the discussion of GOAT, and those 3 guys are Dæhlie, Northug, and Klæbo. Bolshunov could potentially have been, but as the Russians were banned after 2022, he has not been given the opportunity to show his class the last few years. If you check a skier's FIS biography, you can get an idea of their general performance. Here you can see Northug's results from 2015. Placings: 16, 3, 1, 2, 4, 39, 8, 7, 12, and so on. Even going back to his best season ever, 2010, you can see his results being consistently good. But let's take a look at Klæbo's recent record. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. He has close to a perfect winning streak, and it was the same last year as well. The point I'm trying to make is that yes, Northug was a phenomenal skier at his best. He took home 50-kilometer gold medals and was one of the best sprinters, which is truly remarkable. But he had nowhere near the same level of dominance that Klæbo currently has. In fact, most duels versus Martin Sundby in the 2010s were pretty one-sided. Some of you may not like to hear this information, but it's the reality. And I'm sure there will be plenty of explanations as to why these numbers show what they do, but to me the conclusion is quite evident. To be crowned the greatest skier of all time, I would want his record versus Sundby to be a little bit better. Don't get me wrong, Northug is still my favorite skier. He is definitely in the GOAT conversation, and he is by far the greatest ambassador for the sport, but looking solely at performance, I don't think he is in the top 2. And I'm trying to present a more realistic representation of how things really were. So in my opinion, the GOAT debate is between Klæbo and Dæhlie. Now it's time for some information about Bjørn. He won 11 individual gold medals and 21 individual medals in total. He was an old-school type of skier who possessed an extreme endurance, but he lacked the ability to sprint at the end of a race. He also won the overall World Cup 6 times and was the king of the 90s, if you consider the entire decade as a whole. Every once in a while, there was a guy who beat him, as the 90s was a highly competitive era with an extreme level of physicality. And if you compare them to today's athletes, they had a more polarized training model, as well as doping being more prevalent, of course. The combination of these factors meant that the average VO2 max among the top 15 in the world was on a whole other level. When Dæhlie retired, he was crowned the best male Norwegian skier of all time. Versatility. You can divide competitive cross-country skiing into 4 main categories: classic sprint, classic distance, skate sprint, and skate distance. When you classify an athlete as being well-rounded, it means that the skier masters several of these 4 disciplines. If you only master one, you are considered a specialist. An example of a specialist is Iivo Niskanen, because he is only relevant in one discipline at the world level. One of the reasons you won't find many athletes who are super versatile is because these disciplines are opposites and require different skills. If you draw a diagonal, you will often find the specific athlete's greatest strength and biggest weakness. If you're really good at skate sprints, you're often bad at classic distance. If you're good at skate distance, you're typically bad at classic sprints. The main reason is that people have genetic predispositions for being good at one thing or another. This is too complicated to analyze in depth in today's video, but you get the point. Every once in a while, you'll find someone who can do 3 or even 4 of these things equally well, but that's rare. Johannes Klæbo has dominated 3 of these categories for how long? We're starting to approach a decade. He has one weakness: the combination of skate and distance. He has won mass starts in skate, but no individual start races after countless attempts. So there is obviously a genetic limitation for that particular discipline. Bjørn Dæhlie, on the other hand, won both skate and classic, and the majority of great distance skiers throughout history have mastered both styles. However, in Bjørn Dæhlie's era, sprint hadn't yet been invented, but I can say with 100% certainty, he would have been terrible at it. So overall, I would say Klæbo is actually more well-rounded than Dæhlie, because he checks 3 out of 4 boxes versus 2 boxes. A valid argument for Northug being the GOAT is that at one point in time, he was one of the few athletes who was relatively balanced and actually capable of winning all of these disciplines. However, the reason I personally don't think he's the GOAT is because there were 2 long periods of time where he wasn't the best in any of these categories. Gold medals and the level debate. Dæhlie has 11 individual gold medals. As of now, in May of 2025, Klæbo has 9, but it would have been 10 if he had not been disqualified in 2021. In Trondheim in 2025, he pulled off the impossible feat no other athlete has done before, winning 6 out of 6 gold medals in a world championship. But it's the elephant in the room, you know. The competition among the top 30 guys is obviously not the same as it used to be. The Russians are banned, and the Norwegians obviously have better skis. But when I say that the level is lower, I have never meant to claim that Johannes is weaker. I'm just implying that the depth in the men's division is worse than previous eras. It's very important to emphasize the difference. To be clear, Klæbo is something very special, and he would have been relevant regardless of which era he competed in. In sprint, he is in fact way ahead of any other athlete that's ever existed, both in terms of peak level and in terms of consistency. What he has done since he stepped into the World Cup is nothing short of freakish. The man has not only won almost every race, but he's winning by the most ridiculous margins imaginable. I've seen some people who claim that he would have been mocked by prime Northug in a sprint. As someone who has witnessed both eras, I can say that it's a wildly unlikely scenario, and I just laugh every time I hear someone say that. People always like to compare them, and I think a lot of people draw a conclusion based on emotions. What you have to realize is that Klæbo and Northug are not the same, and this is actually a huge mismatch in favor of Klæbo. Petter was a great sprinter, but Johannes is just another creature, you know. He's unbelievable. Nobody compares to Klæbo in sprint. Absolutely nobody. World Cup results. The overall World Cup is probably the best measure of an athlete's performance because it includes so many races. Those who have won the overall World Cup have been decorated and versatile athletes that performed well over an extended period of time. As of 2025, Klæbo has won it 5 times, while Dæhlie won it 6 times. But you have to take Klæbo's still relatively young age into consideration. A couple of years from now, he's likely to surpass Dæhlie, and he'll probably have more individual gold medals as well, as I find it unlikely that he will retire anytime soon. Klæbo has 4 overall Tour de Ski victories so far. Tour de Ski did not yet exist in the 90s, so Dæhlie never had the opportunity. One of the most prestigious classics we have in cross-country skiing is the 50-kilometer race in Holmenkollen. For some reason, Dæhlie never managed to win this race. Klæbo has managed to win this race once, in 2024, but there might be more to come. Klæbo and Dæhlie are fairly evenly matched when you look at most of these statistics, but there is one criterion where Klæbo exceeds all other skiers, and that is the number of World Cup wins. At the present time, still only 28 years of age, he's already at 98. For comparison, the majority of all-time greats range between 20 and 30 World Cup victories. However, you can't make a direct comparison with the late 80s and 90s, as there were a lot fewer races compared to now. Dæhlie is number 2 on the list at 46 wins, but there aren't twice as many races now, so even when adjusting for it, Klæbo has still been more dominant. The overview of Dæhlie's results also confirms that his record was good, but he never had the kind of perfect winning streak Klæbo has. And then the same question arises again. Is it because Klæbo is so unique? Or does the fact that one man wins basically all competitions rather say something about the current level of the men's division? While difficult to compare across eras, there are clear indications that the general level of physicality was higher in the 90s. But at the same time, technique has changed for the better over the years. If we look at Klæbo's results before the Russians were banned, he wasn't as dominant as he's been lately, but it was still pretty darn good. Even though Klæbo and Dæhlie are very different types of skiers, both of them are specimens that represent the pinnacle of our sport. This is the old-school VO2 monster versus the modern technical artist. In a way, they represent the evolution of cross-country skiing. Younger generations have a habit of only appreciating what they see, and they think that everyone who came before them was trash. The level of sport isn't always a linear progression, as in some eras there are many talented athletes pushing each other to the next level. The 90s skiers did really push the boundaries of human performance. I do have a problem with people discrediting Dæhlie's achievements just because it's a long time ago, But it's also kind of natural as the majority of my subscribers are young and don't have a deep insight about skiing history. Here you can see an overview of career accomplishments. I think it's about time we determine a verdict. Klæbo has a weakness in individual start skating. But do you really have to master all disciplines to be the GOAT? Not necessarily, as Dæhlie would never have mastered sprint either. Although you should never hand out victories in advance, the most realistic scenario is that Klæbo will surpass Dæhlie in both the number of individual gold medals and overall World Cup trophies. Depending on how long he keeps on going, he'll end up with a certain number of World Cup wins, and that record will be virtually impossible to beat. While you can question the recent level of performance without Russians, if you see the whole picture, Klæbo is overall the most dominant skier the world has ever seen. I do not throw away these claims easily, but I mean having more than double the number of World Cup victories as the second guy, while still being under the age of 30, and being the favorite in every single race over a decade is unreal. He has the longevity, and he's the modern champ. At the end of the day, there have been many great skiers throughout history, but Johannes Klæbo is the only one who managed to make cross-country skiing predictable, and in some people's eyes, kind of boring to watch. He is the only skier throughout history where every single weekend you sit and watch cross-country skiing in front of your TV, you know for a fact that he's going to win the sprint, and that's why he's the greatest cross-country skier of all time. And finally, in case there was any doubt about what Northug himself thinks about this topic,
Jeg vil si at Johannes Klæbo tidenes beste langrennsløper gjennom tidene.
thank you so much for watching the video.